Today, I'd like to talk about fixing 3-cent issues and what are our customers' pain points when paying for storage. I want to start out with a little bit of a story. You all that know me know I love to tell a story. I was at Culver's and I was charging up my car, and I went in and ordered an iced tea that was $2.58. So I gave the employees $2, 2 quarters, a nickel, and 3 pennies, right? That's exact change. So the employee said, "Oh, we don't take pennies." And I looked down at the money and I was like, well, how can you have an eight, at 58 without taking 3 pennies? And they said, "We don't take pennies anymore." So I don't know how to even fix this problem. I think if this is where we're going and we don't have pennies anymore, we need to fix this. And it's not going to just affect Culver's, right? It's going to affect the storage industry. So I want you to think about the transaction and the legalities of it. First off, the regulatory guidance is kind of lacking right now about what to do about rounding and causing, some retailers are worried about this lawsuits or especially according to this National Retail Federation, they're concerned about it. And they think that this is going to be a problem for a lot of retailers that take cash in cash. So the final production of pennies happened on November 12th of 2025. So pennies took 3 cents to produce. I mean, it really makes sense not to have the penny, but we have a lot of things in our that we buy that end up with an odd amount. So it's estimated that 56 million in annual savings for the government just getting rid of this. So I think it's a great idea, other than the fact that we have to do something about that in self-storage. But I did find a fun fact. The penny has been around since 1793, which is kind of cool. It's getting old. And this one looks pretty old. Because I think the funny thing is I remember being in science and we did experiments with pennies. So because most of them were copper then, and the penny, the light shade of green, and it went immersed in like salt and vinegar. I don't know if any of you did that or old enough to do that, and in my chemistry class, the one thing I can really remember is using that lemon juice to clean off a penny. And I've done that like as an adult, remembering like, oh man, that penny looks terrible. And my kids are like, "What are you doing?" I said, "Well, lemon juice works on this." And they think I'm just kind of out of my mind. And for real nerds, placing the penny in and steel in nails in a bowl of salt and vinegar, the nails got electroplated with copper and the pennies with zinc. So that's kind of a fun thing if you want to try that, even if you're, just having a little fun or nothing to do one day. But I do think there are some problems for self-storage. We have legal compliance risks. We have the customer frustration over rounding prices, the operational accounting issues that we're going to face with this. But if customers are paying with pennies, you can. I mean, it is still legal tender. But this man in Utah, he went in and he got mad at these people. And so he paid them in 2,500 pennies. 14 pounds. That's how it is. Apparently, they got into an argument and the police were called. And but when he poured the 2,500 pennies on the counter, they thought that was, not a good thing for him to do. And even though they say they accept cash, they didn't mean 2,500 pennies. And they were kind of on the floor and stuff like that. So he got arrested for that. So and I will say, I've had a couple of storage people tell me that someone paid in pennies because they were mad. So it's not just, at a doctor's office or a clinic, but you want to be prepared about the pennies. And I don't think if you don't sell any retail, then you may not have that. But if you're a place that has tax on storage, yes, you might have it again. So, but you want to talk about or think about some rounding policies to the next 5 cents. on your products and things like that. But remember, people can use these coins and they will be around for a while. So we may have to deal with this for, I don't know, it may be years. I really don't know. But right now, the states that have tax on self-storage is Arkansas, Florida, Iowa, Louisiana, New Jersey, Texas, and South Dakota. But there are some other states that have some state taxes on goods and services. So, and those are Alaska, Delaware, Montana, New Hampshire, and Oregon. And there are also things like different types of taxation in Hawaii, New Mexico, South Dakota, West Virginia. So it leaves kind of 41 states and the District of Columbia where services aren't taxed. But by default, some of these other places will have taxes. So, and again, probably very often on our products that we sell. But keep in mind the United States coins and currency, they're legal tender, and we've got to deal with it and accept the pennies or not accept the pennies. But again, I think it won't hurt us either to do either way, whichever way you want to do. But if you don't take the pennies, I think you should put a little sign up. That's my recommendation. But there's nothing in the law that requires a private business to accept coins or dollar bills for transactions. You can say that you have to do credit cards, something like that. But if merchants want to sell products, like we want to sell our boxes, packing and moving supplies, lots of people just come in and just pay cash for those types of things. But so you want to be thinking about that. But if you really want to sell something, think about this. In life, you can exchange for gold bullion. You could do it for Swedish fish or Monopoly money, whatever you wanted to do. But now we realize that if this penny goes away, then we're going to have to, figure out what we're going to do. But this is how bus lines can actually legally refuse to accept dollar bills because you put coins in a little thing. I haven't ridden a bus, but I mean a bus like the public bus, but I understand that you put coins in there, not dollars. And even like gas station clerks, they can say, hey, we refuse the $100 bill because they don't have anything to, and we've kind of run across that in storage too. Someone comes in with $100 bill and we don't have enough change to give them back for that $100. So I think you want to remember, try to have a uniform treatment of all these issues, because watch what the state law is. Treat all customers fairly. That's what, you don't want to have one set of rules for one person and not someone else. In self-storage, we don't even mean that every customer has to be the same price for the identical size space, because that's not uniform in our business, because we go up and down in prices, or we might lower it when they first come in and then we slowly go up on their cost of their unit. So what we want to avoid is discrimination, basically, based on gender, race, or disability. And that can happen in self-storage, and it has happened. So you be careful about that. I have increased rent for some customers who must be supervised while on the property, but I advise them of that. We are now going to, take and maybe this is a person trying to live out of the unit or whatever it is. I go up on their rent, but I also say to them, here's what's going to happen. You can only access during the office hours. You may not go after hours because you're violating, what our rules are. So you can still have those things but you want to try to treat everyone as best you can, right? Remember your brand reputation. There's kind of some risks sometimes if we have so many policies that are not good for customers. And, customers may not like the rounding up to the nearest nickel. But I think if we take what we have out, like for sale, the locks of boxes and the other things, and just say, including tax, and this is what the total is, and make it an even amount and get that odd amount off of there. And you're going to also probably come up with some accounting inconsistencies in our software. So be aware of that, because if you're rounding one way or the other and you end up not getting the pennies that you were supposed to, there may be a problem. And also the communication gaps. I think businesses need to be clear and educate the customers that, sorry, we don't take pennies anymore, or making sure you do all the right things, making sure you give the customer a receipt, post signage there saying what the policies are about paying, because it is important, and not just pennies either. You may not want whatever your particular thing is, but I know there's some storage properties that don't take credit cards. I'm fascinated by that because so many people have credit cards, or they charge an extra upcharge for the credit cards too. So there could be a financial impact in self-storage because, with approximately right now 20 to 30 states impose sales tax on rentals, but most storage companies sell locks and packing and moving supplies to customers, which are taxed. So your storage property needs to be aware of what you're dealing with. And if it's odd issues, I think, just try to round it. It's not no more 99 or whatever. Just make it an even $13 and whatever, or whatever your pricing is. Or talk to your owner about it and see what they say. But I think without pennies, banks and retailers are going to struggle a little with cash only transactions. And that would include us, right? If we don't have some pennies around. But it does force businesses to find ways to acquire more coins in case, so they don't lose those cash only customers. And we do have in storage cash only customers. So remember, there's also some pricing strategy disruption too. That common 99 thing that we do where it doesn't make it sound quite as big when you're selling your products. But my suggestion is that you add your tax to the product that you put out and put it with the total, as opposed to adding the tax afterwards, because it's an extra pain, I think. And I think you can do that in the software also. Thank you for listening to this, because I know it's not a huge deal, but I do think we have to do something about it in self-storage. And I wanted managers just to be aware that if we get rid of the penny, we may have an issue with our products or selling our products and giving people change back. And how do we do that and not having, butting heads with the customer over that? We don't want that. We want to think about it first and implement something and make sure that, I think if you just make sure everything is just an even number, and then you don't have any tax on top of that, or it's including tax or whatever it is, you'll be perfectly fine. But think about that and fix that ahead of time before we have a major shortage or some issue that you may have at your storage property. Well, if any of you have any ideas for webinars and want to contact us, it's carol@skillcheck.com. Or if you have any questions, please feel free to call or either email me, whatever you'd like to do. And thank you for listening, and happy renting.